So every year I get tapped on the shoulder, or your favorite content creator, or even these media scouts, right? They'll be like, but Voch, this player, why did he fall into the draft? He's so dynamic. He's so fantastic. Why are they falling? Well, there are plenty of reasons. I kind of want to talk about many of them today. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and my team this year is drafting at 24. So a lot of people, they'll be like, hey, can we get like a solid starting player at 24? Like, is there really going to be great talent that we can find at 24? And my answer is sure, because every year there's always these stars in the second and third rounds that just fall through the cracks. There are many reasons. I'm going to give you some of those reasons today. So let's go scheme fit, right? Every team is basically a combination of traits. We talk about the coaches and what they want to do, and they need players to do exactly what they're asking of their players, right? So for example, take a guy like Elijah Mitchell, right? You look at the San Francisco 49ers, they actually drafted Sherman in the second round, the more valuable player, but it turns out maybe he didn't fit what they were trying to do. So they get Elijah Mitchell, who runs with power like Sherman, but he's a little more bursty than Trey. So he's a guy that ended up playing a lot more snaps. He was a lot more productive for San Francisco. Now, if you look at his production, you'll go, okay, well, why wasn't this dude drafted a little higher than what he was? Well, he didn't have that total, complete combination of traits that made him, a top guy. You draft these players based on traits and not production. For example, Richard Sherman was a 5th round pick, but Richard Sherman was only really asked to play cover 3, and cover 3 is turn you back to the sideline, patrol deep thirds, and that's what he was really good at. Then we see Richard Sherman later, when he left Seattle, he went to San Francisco, he played a little bit more man, and he started getting his ass toasted. Well, that's not what Richard Sherman was good at. Richard Sherman does get smoked in man coverage, but when you're only asking him to do majority cover 3 things, that's when Richard Sherman gets to shine, just be a long football player with a lot of football intelligence. So since we're talking about Richard Sherman and his team fit, I think another angle of that, and this happens a lot with wide receivers, but the players that aren't complete, but they have one skill that makes them Super Saiyans, right? So look at a player like, let's just start with like Deebo Samuel, right? Deebo Samuel is not a complete wide receiver. He fell in the draft for that reason, but that was appropriate, right? He's not the tallest guy. He doesn't have the best speed in the world. He doesn't have the most nuanced route running in the world. But what he is he's hard as hell to tackle. He's super yak guy. So if he fits in this particular system and he has this one skill that's unbeatable, the you can't tackle me skill, then sure, get him some bubbles, get him some reverses, line him up in the backfield at running back, hand the ball to him, get him on these shallow crosses, these easy routes, and just let him be hard to tackle and just bombard him with targets. That's how you operate a guy like Deebo Samuel. If Deebo Samuel was in another offense and they asked him to run post corners and to win, one-on-one matches with nuance and route running, then he wouldn't be a guy that works. You have to use Deebo Samuel in a way that complements Deebo Samuel. The same with DK Metcalf, right? DK Metcalf is a guy, he doesn't have a lot of diversity in his route tree, and honestly, to be fair, when he was coming out in the draft process, he couldn't turn very well. He just wasn't a very, lateral moving player. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. He just wasn't complete. But the things that he does well is he's this stud athlete. He's big as hell, he's strong as hell, hard to tackle. If you just stick that dude to what he's good at and not ask him to do Calvin Johnson type things, and you're going to get production out of DK Metcalf. That's how those dudes fall. So when guys in this draft are going to fall, you can look at a guy like Khalil Shakir from, Boise State. Don't ask him to do what you're going to ask Garrett Wilson to do. And this is a pretty good wide receiver class to kind of run that experiment with, because the top 5 guys, they're all different in terms of their wide receiver skill. And some coaches are going to want different things from those players. So why would one of these wide receivers fall? Well, because they simply didn't fit what that coach was trying to do at that point. That's why a guy like CeeDee Lamb falls, right? If you're just watching the draft, you can pretty much stereotype your way into figuring out that CeeDee Lamb was going to fall. That's what I did. I was going to be like, the Raiders always draft these fast guys. We could just assume that Ruggs is going to go there, and, Denver's going to want a guy, but they got a big guy on their team in Cameron Sutton. They got a guy that, does body you up things. They, maybe they want a route runner to try to complement Cameron Sutton, so they may go Jerry Jeudy. That's exactly what my conversation was, and there's actually a video to prove it. Y'all go find it on my Voch Lombardi channel, me reacting to the CeeDee Lamb pick. So that just led me to believe that not because CeeDee Lamb's a bad player or anything, but we're just gonna, assume that he doesn't fit some of these earlier teams' needs. And then there are other positions that go in front of him, and CeeDee Lamb kind of falls in the draft, and he was my wide receiver number 1. And the same with Justin Jefferson, right? He's gonna fall in the draft because teams, they're gonna look at how he fits, and they're gonna go, yeah, okay, we'll pass on him, and before you know it, 2 of the best wide receivers in that wide receiver class are falling. Speaking of Justin Jefferson, another thing that teams do when they're drafting and make these good players fall is they simply overthink it. If you watch Justin Jefferson's film, that dude was getting touchdowns, lined up in the slot, lined up outside. He was a one-on-one guy beater. He would find soft zones in coverage. He was deep ball guy. He would smoke these SEC teams week by week by week. But you will see a lot of draft fans just kind of overthinking it a little bit. Oh, Voch, Justin Jefferson's only good because Jamar Chase is on the other side. Justin Jefferson's only good because Joe Burrow's throwing the football. Justin Jefferson's only good because nobody else is giving him attention. Well, they're giving him attention now, and he's still showing off just like he was in when he was in LSU when they made their championship run. So sometimes you just don't overthink. Sometimes you watch the film and you get what you see in film, and you'll go, oh, Justin Jefferson's not good because everybody else around him is great. He's good in this group of other good players, so that's why LSU's offense is great. Now, I'm not here to shit on the teams that make bad quarterback decisions, because evaluating quarterbacks is nothing like evaluating, wide receiver or something like that. So I'm not even going to give teams grief for failing to draft a quarterback properly. But if we're not talking about quarterback and we're just talking about evaluating these other positions, long story short, teams really suck at drafting. Like, they're bad at it. And I'm trying to sit down and think about, hey, man, why are teams constantly missing on players? And it's not like they're missing on players like, oh, well, they just didn't draft a good player, but they drafted a good player. They just didn't draft that guy. Some of these, like Seattle's made some weird picks in the first round. The Rams, when they were the whole Tutu Atwell in the second round thing is a head scratcher. I look at, teams like the Raiders. I'll look at them and be like, hey, there's no way you had this much faith in Cleveland Farrell as you did. Or they'll draft a Damon Arnett or something with a Henry Ruggs, and either one of those dudes are on the team. Now, there are a lot of head scratchers. And, to be fair, as long as it ain't my team, I don't really care, because we need head scratches, because what makes the draft so fantastic is parity. And we need that parity. We need, when some team sends their representative to that podium, we need the Benny Hill music playing behind them, because we know they're about to make a mistake. And that mistake can be the reason why CeeDee Lamb falls to my Dallas Cowboys, or Micah Parsons falls to my Cowboys at 12.
Can I get one more?
One last thing I'll mention, and I won't, bring up, guys like they get injured or like bad behavior guys, they robbed the bank or something, so they got to go in the 4th round. I'm not going to mention those guys. But we are going to talk about position value, in which I think position value is nonsense to an extent. I think position value exists when players are in the same caliber. Right. And this could tie into overthinking, honestly. But if there are 2 players in the same caliber, if you have a off-ball linebacker that's an elite player, and a pass rusher that's an elite player, you take the pass rusher. Elite quarterback versus elite one tech, you take the elite quarterback. But if there's an elite one tech versus a pretty casual defensive end, you always take the one tech. So that's what's going to be interesting about this class. There are 3 players in this class that have some of the best film, in the whole class. That's Nakobe Dean, but he plays off-ball linebacker. Tyler Linderbaum, he plays center. And Jordan Davis, who plays defensive tackle. If we're just talking about film, if you stack those 3 players versus any other 3 players in this class, they're going to win that damn 3 out of 3 in terms of who has the best film. But Linderbaum is going to fall because teams don't really evaluate center or interior offensive line as that important. And same for off-ball linebacker, and same for defensive tackle. Now, Voch, why is that the case? Because they feel like, okay, well, if you're a 350-pound player that just plugs the gap and you don't give me pass rush, I can find another player to do that. Oh, if you're a linebacker, you're off the ball, you may not cover the best, but you just kind of run and hit. I can find guys that are just fast that can just run and hit. But I think it's different when those dudes are elite. So if we're talking about Nakobe Dean, in which I think he's elite, he's just a little small, And he plays off-ball linebacker. When we talk about guys like Nakobe Dean, Tyler Linderbaum, and Jordan Davis, I don't think there should be a conversation. I think those dudes should be drafted as high as these other players that, Trevor Penning plays left tackle. We're going to consider him first just because he plays left tackle. Jermaine Johnson plays pass rusher. We're going to consider him first just because he plays that. I think that's nonsense. But we need things like that because we need ambiguity in the draft. We need this parity. And, of course, teams that draft at the 24th overall pick like the Dallas Cowboys, we need y'all to not draft these great players so we can. That's all I got for y'all today, man. This has been my soliloquy, just my thoughts. We're going to try to do these on Fridays. It may happen whenever. We're not doing a live stream. I just want to get out some uninterrupted thoughts that I thought were interesting. And you tell me, how do y'all feel about these kind of videos? And you can leave in the chat box what topics would you like me to hit on. We'll do that. Follow me on Twitter, VOCHLOMBARDI, and make sure to hit like on everything The Volume.